How did I go from being the best player in high school to not the best player anymore? Well, actually, nothing has changed. Well, yeah, you're still the exact same person, right? But your identity changed. You started thinking of yourself in a totally different light. You started thinking of yourself as the bottom tier, as opposed to being at the top tier, right? Put yourself in a room when you're being massively competitive with guys that you are superiorly confident you can wax in whatever sport you're gonna play, and watch your skill set rise. Like, I mean, just rise. They're good enough to challenge you, but you're like, I can win. I can be the dog here, right? You're going to be exponentially better that day. If you're in a room where you just know everybody's terrible, you're gonna be mediocre. If you're in a room where you believe everybody is significantly better and you don't have the skill set anymore to catch them because you're viewing it in terms of years of experience, saying like, oh, well, they've been here for 3 years, 4 years, so I don't have the same experience level. I don't know how to cope with the fact that I'm on display 24/7 and my job is threatened. Then sure, you're a totally different identity than the guy you were in high school. In high school, you were top dog. In high school, you weren't ever worried about missing a start, not getting the coach's love, all of these things. Now you're in a situation where you're not getting those things, and it allowed you to change what you thought about yourself. And that's the biggest issue. And it's not easy to go in and just act like the big dog, right? That's a really tough part. Your outside identity may have to adjust because of social issues, right? Your internal must stay congruent to who you are. The easiest way to do that is be overly prepared for the situation you're going into in terms of make sure you're strong enough, because we're males, so a form of strength is going to be extremely connected to our confidence level, okay? If you don't have the strength component, like you're just not flat out stronger than most guys on your team, then you better have the skill component. So that you better have something that can get you to feel like I can stay at this level, I'm good enough at this level, right? And that will sort of furnace your internal identity and keep it burning and keep it thriving. The other thing is you gotta heed these opportunities. You can't look at them as any different, right? That's the biggest issue, is we allow circumstances to change our internal approach to what we think about ourselves. So what I mean by that is, if you had to throw a bullpen for your high school coach midweek, and it was against guys that you absolutely wanted to strike out, what's your confidence level you would go out there and do that? Pretty fucking high, right? But then you're going and you're facing guys who are arguably probably, when you look in the grand scheme of like talent, they're probably not that much different in terms of how you would approach them pitching wise, and yet now you're walking them. So you're getting back to making processing issues, right? These execution issues are happening left and right, and they're changing the way you throw, because ultimately at the end of the day, you've changed the way you think, and you've altered how you think about yourself. And that's the biggest problem when we're sending freshmen to go to college. Where do you not see this? Freshmen that experience success very quickly. A freshman that gets an opportunity very quickly and experiences success early and then can build off of that success and maybe gets 1 or 2, they tend to keep their internal identity very strong right away, and they can push through even the biggest of adversity. We have a guy right now who we all know who has played two-way at a very high-level school because he was afforded the opportunity because of things that happened in the offseason at that school, right? But he was atrocious on both ends of that at times in the year, and then at times had massive success. But what was the biggest resolve there? See, his resiliency was high because he still knew he was the dog, right? He still knew he was going out. So the pressure of the future got removed from him because he knew he was going to be able to perform and stay on the field, whether he performed greatly or not. I would immediately have a very adult version of that conversation with a coach. Immediately. Like I would say to him, okay, that's fine. You don't believe I'm capable of playing at this level. Then am I redshirting because you believe with certain attributes of growth that I will be? And then if that's the case, what is the plan for us to get there? Or am I just not good enough in your eyes to play at this level? Then please give me my release. I think that's the only way that conversation goes. Because if they don't have a plan or an approach to how you are capable of playing at that, and that was the words used to you, then I don't see any correcting of that relationship moving forward. I'm not saying you have to believe you're the top dog. I'm saying you have to believe in the same person you were when you went there, right? Like, you have a certain level of skill when you went there. That didn't change just because you're not provided the opportunity to get on the field. And I think that's what a lot of people see. A lot of times, like, your belief in your skill is attached to your role on a team, right? This is why we have guys that play at really bad high schools think they're really good. And they're really not good, because their skill is attached to the skill level that's around them, and they view themselves as being very good. Then they get a rude awakening when they have no college offers. But the alternative also happens. When you're playing around a lot of really talented guys in high school and you are still pretty good and you're really good, maybe you're an everyday starter, and then you go to college and now you're not an everyday starter, you immediately start questioning your skill set. Your skill set hasn't changed. You're the same person. That was a week ago. The only difference is the environment. You're allowing the environment to alter your identity. That's the most important part. I mean, you're coming to a situation where you were given an attribute that you needed to improve, or whether you were told that or not, you're assuming that, right? Yeah. And then, but yet your focal point throughout that time period was on, you know, still getting outs and doing these things. If we were looking at an attribute over that time period, and that was the sole attribute we were focusing on, then we need to show growth and improvement in that. And that needs to be our primary focus, which is often extremely difficult to do while we're being competitive, because ultimately that is one piece of the pitching sequence. So you lose your competitiveness because you realize the competitiveness is not what needs to be worked on. And the skill of getting outs was already something you had conquered. So it's not your primary focus, but yet the problem is you're being given two different messages. See, because if you don't go out and get outs and you don't improve velocity, well, then you're never going to play. So you fall into the scenario of just rescuing yourself and just making sure that every time, hey man, I just gotta go out there and get outs because at least I have that. And then you look at your off time as being like, okay, well, now I know I need to throw significantly harder, so this has to be my primary focus of where I'm doing these things. But that then, in effect, becomes very challenging during that time. I'm not trying to make the first year experience seem easy by saying like, oh, you're just changing your identity. Just revert back to like understanding who you are. But you also have to take into context, which is why I gave you the answer that I gave you, for that conversation, because like, listen, ultimately at the end of the day, it's your career, right? Anybody that like had a problem with what I just said there, that means your best interest is not the kids, which that's solely what mine is. I can care less about any other organization and how successful they are. That doesn't matter to me. I'm not paid by them, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, my concern is this athlete that we have worked with for X number of time having a successful career? And is there anything I can advise them, give them, help them in any way that can further their career? So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a conversation of like, what am I supposed to be working on? How am I supposed to be conquering that? And how does what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis align with what I'm trying to conquer? It becomes very difficult. I'm not saying that that's an easy thing to do, but having a very logical conversation sometimes can massively open up your understanding of what is actually being asked of you. And I think a lot of times people hesitate to have those conversations because they're afraid at the consequences of them. But why do I want to be in a scenario ever that I'm afraid of the consequences of what might happen with me asking questions or me trying to be better for the overall process?